I've been wanting to do something like this, and I do it every once in a while because I feel like it's needed. Um, we're doing a series on what is called apologetics. Okay, so if you don't know what that is, it means basically simply these are the philosophical, historical, or other evidences that defend Christianity. Because literally, the term where we get apology from is a Greek term that means to give a defense for. So you stop and think about it. Anytime you're apologizing, saying, hey, I'm sorry I did this, you're kind of defending yourself against whatever it is that happened. Because the only defense in this case is strength, right? Anyway, so we're going through this and wanted to take a different route. I wanted to call this series Room for Doubt. And just had to say that historically speaking, church has been like the last place you go to start questioning your faith, which if you stop and think about it, it's just dumb. But it's true because we feel like we're supposed to come in here Sunday morning and we're supposed to be good and secure. It's like, oh, I'm 100% in. I'm all about this Jesus thing and the church, and it's a beautiful thing, and we all get along together beautifully. And so when we start to have doubts, we feel like no one else is doing that. No one else is struggling with this, and so I'm on my own. So we just keep it to ourselves. And, maybe we read a book, maybe we watch some YouTube videos, but, we deal with this on our own. We don't bring it to church. And I'm here to say that church should be the exact opposite. It should be the place you go to struggle with things. And I'll bet you, matter of fact, let's just ask by raising hands, how many of you guys have struggled seriously with your faith at some point in time in your life, any point in time in your life? The question is, can I believe or not? So yes, I see a lot of people. And for most of us, this is true. And of course, people are going to have doubts because we live in what a lot of people are calling the information age. We have the internet at our disposal. If you have any questions, you just Google the answer, or you go to YouTube and you find a video or something. You've got a number of places you can go to for information. And that's part of our problem, is that this is the information age. It's not necessarily the fact age. People will throw a bunch of information at you, and some of it's true and some of it's not. And some of us have a good filter for what's true, and some of us don't. And we get taken in. And none of us are foolproof. We all get taken in now and again. Sometimes, I remember reading a book years ago. It's called The Wizard's First Rule. And basically, the Wizard's First Rule, the name of the book, the rule is that anyone will believe anything for the right reasons. It's usually because they're either scared of it, that it might be true, or they want it to be true. And that's all of us. We all understand. Like I said, some people are better at it and straining that sort of thing out than others are. But the simple fact is, none of us are exempt. We have tons and tons and tons of information. You can get buried under information. Matter of fact, I'd say that's probably our biggest problem today, is that we have so much information at our disposal that we don't know how to sort through it all. We don't know always what sources are reliable and true, and sometimes even the sources that we feel like should be reliable and true are not always. And we find out that all of us, to some degree or another, are motivated by ulterior motives, shall we say. But we have to sort through this. And it's not uncommon for people to start finding videos. Matter of fact, if you do a search for evidence for the Bible, you know what you're going to find? You're going to find basically two types of videos. You're going to find evidences for the Bible, and you're going to find evidences against the Bible. You're going to probably find, honestly, I would guess you're probably going to find more against the Bible than, I don't know that for sure. I didn't stop and count or anything, but that's my honest opinion. And the simple fact is that for each of us in our faith, what my hope is that ultimately we're going to be able to say this simple thing, that I want to follow what is true. Because if you're here for anything other than the fact that you think Jesus could be true, you think Bible might have things to say that are important and valuable, or you're fully convinced of those things, or anywhere in the spectrum in between, you know, if you're here for any other reason, you're here for the wrong reasons. Because ultimately, while the only quote-unquote good work that God expects from us is belief, it's not always simple to arrive at that. It can be a challenge sometimes. And I think we kind of come at things with this misunderstanding that that belief means, okay, I'm 100% there. And I'm here to tell you that I think, honestly, belief is at 51%. It's like, okay, I'm there, but maybe I'm just barely hanging on. And that's okay. This is a place you should be able to come to hopefully move from 51 towards 100%, however far along that scale you can get. So how do we approach doubts? And so some of us are a question everything kind of person. Maybe you know somebody like that. It's like if the teacher says this, they're going to argue the point. They're going to make them work for it. You know, if the news tells you that, then they're going to stop and they're going to say, okay, well, let's take a look at this. Let's tear it apart. So, yeah, and that's an important question too. What are they not saying? Because that's very much that's a very, 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 very normal thing. And to be fair, most situations are bigger. We can't cover everything. But what are they not saying? And why are they not saying it? It's always important. But I'm here to tell you that, honestly, doubts can be a blessing for the church. Okay? And that may seem counterintuitive. I don't know. But it is. It can be a blessing for the church. Why? Because it drives us to find the truth. And if you're one of those skeptical people, that's not a bad thing. Okay? So, if you know, there's a guy out there. His name's Gary Habermas. Well, that's not my last name, but that's beside the point. At any rate, he has studied the evidence for the resurrection, probably, from what I understand, by people who know better than I do. Probably studied the evidence for the resurrection more than any other human being alive, and arguably more than any human being who has been. Just to give you an idea, he's apparently dropping a 4-volume book series on evidences for the resurrection.
I like Lace Strobel is another one that along that same line.
Yeah. Well, this guy, volume number 1 is expected to be 1,100 pages.
Oh my goodness.
Volume 1 of 4. I don't think I could write that much on anything, probably on everything. I don't think I got that many words in me. But it's just to give you an idea of how much time this guy has poured into this first volume. Is that the normal doctoral dissertation? Okay, so you go for higher education, get into the doctorate realm. That's typically $2,000. hours that you spend researching and writing your dissertation. 2,000 hours. Okay? He put 32,000 hours into this book. That's how much evidence it is. But you know what the thing is that there's a point in time after he'd gotten his doctoral degree and all that, and he was working through evidences, he went through a period of serious doubt. So even people who have studied strong evidences historically can struggle. And I'm just telling you that just to let you know that we're not alone. That even people who seem like they have it all together probably don't. And so it's good to know. But you know, the great thing about those doubts that he had is that they drove him to research more, to dig in deeper, and to find more information. And in the end, he still landed on the side of, I believe. And that's cool to me. But I wanted to let you know, doubting can be a painful process. It's not fun to go through. And so we need to make sure that we love people where they're at in their journey. So no matter where they're at, whether they're staunch atheist or whatever religion, or they're a staunch Christian, or like I said, anywhere in between, we're going to love people in wherever they're at in that journey. And just recognize that people who are wrestling with doubt, often, like I said, they are hurting in some way or another. Often in more than one way, they're hurting. Mm-hmm. And so, what's that old saying? Hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. Just recognize that when someone's wrestling with doubt, they may lash out. They may argue in a way that is not always helpful, shall we say. It kind of starts to feel like a personal attack, maybe. I don't know. It's not always going to be that way. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying that that sort of thing is not abnormal. So just recognize there's some pain somewhere along that journey that is probably causing that reaction. So I'm just asking us to be a little gracious with them. So, question I have for you is basically, do you think that doubt is the opposite of faith? No? Okay. Okay, good. That's where I landed too. Because really it's unbelief. Sounds pretty simple when you say it, but emotionally what people feel like, especially if they've been in church, maybe they've been raised in church, but you know, they've come to this place and they feel like they're supposed to have all their beliefs together. And you come in and it's just painful because you feel like you stick out.
I was just going to say, to me, doubt means uncertainty.
Yeah.
So you're just not certain.
And that's good. That's exactly the next point I was going to have is that there's a difference between confidence and certainty. There's precious little in life we can be genuinely certain of. I mean, we build our lives on ideas that somebody else thought up. That's, you know, if you go to a new car lot and you say, I want to take this car for a test drive, they're going to hand you whatever it takes in order to get that thing started. And you're taking it on faith that it's going to start. You're assuming that the engineers who designed it and the people who actually constructed it knew what they were doing well enough to make a product that in the end was going to work. And then at the end of that process, because admittedly, I've test driven many new cars in my life, but every single one I've ever gotten in had some number of miles on it. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they tested out. Mm-hmm. At least they're supposed to.
Needs maintenance.
So yeah, I mean, there's little things like that. We're taking it on faith. We're not certain that it's going to start because, you know, you never know, right? There's always a possibility. But we are confident that it will. And maybe that's your vehicle. You know, you get in there, your confidence going to start up. Maybe it's not your vehicle. I've been there, been in that vehicle. I can remember driving a car back when I was a teenager with my brother. We called it the Blue Bomb. So it was not always reliable. But anyway, point is that certainty is different than confidence. And so we can't be 100% confident on a lot of things, especially honestly when it comes to something that happened 2,000 years ago. Be fully confident about it. Now, I recognize again that not everyone's going to be that fully confident, but that's part of what church is supposed to be. It's supposed to be an environment where we foster growth, and that growth is growing in belief, where we're moving from that 51%, I believe, but just barely, to maybe hopefully 100%, where we're all in. There's zero doubt in my mind. Hopefully. So, basically, my point is that faith grows. And I can think of a guy I know, back when we were going to church in Cleveland, we helped start up a church called Stone Lake Church. And there was this guy who started coming to church. It was not uncommon, basically because his wife wanted their family to. They had 2 kids. She really wanted them to be raised with the morals and everything that we find in church. And so she started asking her husband, can we go to church? And so they found us, found it to be a likable environment. And he was an atheist. Not agnostic, not saying, I don't know if there's God. I don't believe there's God. Matter of fact, he was what I call an obnoxious atheist. He's the kind of guy who found Christians and then belittled them for their faith and then basically tried to do his best to destroy their faith. So he was, I guess you could say, an evangelist he was an evangelist for atheism. He's a good guy. To this day, I love this guy. At any rate, through coming to church over a course of weeks, and not so much the Sunday morning thing, but we had a men's and a women's Bible study that was going on. And so he'd come upstairs with the men, and we'd be going through something, and he would just throw out question after question. And some of it was on the material, some of it was on left field, but it was still important to him. He needed to know answers. And so we slowly but surely addressed these concerns. And he came to faith. Right now, he is an associate pastor at a church, at our second church in Cleveland. And for a while, he was the pastor over the campus. And so, at any rate, he moved from total unbelief to belief. But there was one point in his journey, and I got to be there. I got to be there for a lot of significant points in his journey. But the guy who was the campus pastor had come to a few guys at the campus, myself and David included, and he invited us to go on a mission trip to Kenya. Mm. And so, for me, it was pray, okay, God, should I go on this trip or not? For him, it was pray, okay, God, should I go on this trip or not? But also, once he felt like God was telling him to go, he's like, okay, God, I really want this trip to be the final nail in the coffin of my unbelief. So I want to see big and amazing things. I really want to drive this home, put that final nail in the coffin and bury it. He got that. We went to Kenya and we saw some amazing things happen. We saw people healed. There was a guy who walked into the market square. I didn't get to be there for this one. But he didn't walk in, he limped in. They bought him a new pair of shoes because his were just absolutely destroyed. And then just because he felt like God was asking him to, David bent down and said, hey, do you mind if I pray for you? And he prayed for him. And that man, I'm not being figurative, I'm being literal. That man danced out of the market square. because God healed him. And there were other things, but that's another story to me. But anyway, the point is that he had those doubts still. Does God still move in big ways? Was the doubt he was wrestling with. He asked God for signs, and God gave him signs. Point is that he found the place to grow those doubts into belief at church. And that's what I love about that story. Let's see here. So I wanted to talk, and most of what I'm talking about here is from a guy who's a better speaker than I am. His name is Sean McDowell. Okay, so this is not original thoughts from Ross entirely. It's my spin on it, but still. He came up with 4 helpful ways to deal with doubts. Okay, and in a day and age where we are dealing with not only the information age and people having struggled with their doubts, but have you guys ever heard the term deconstruction in terms of Christianity? Yeah. There's been a number of people, some of them Christian musicians, some of them pastors, some of them authors, all stripes of people who at one point did believe and then ran into doubt of some sort, and they basically pulled their faith apart, inspected it, and for a variety of reasons, because people, we all have our own reasons, but they found faith in Jesus lacking one way or another. And this is a very common thing. Matter of fact, it's I would say it's a movement within the church. And so I wanted to just kind of take this idea of deconstruction and give us some helpful things to deal with it. Okay? So the first one is find the root of the issue. Because usually what happens is that when someone has believed for a period of time, whether it is growing up into teenage years and they kind of start questioning as a teenager, or maybe they were older or whatever it was, but usually there's a reason behind the questions. And it's not always just a matter of intellectual issues. And so basically, when it comes to finding the root of the issue, we got to ask questions. What I've found is that when I've talked with people, and I love apologetics, this is an area of interest for me. And so I've helped people address some of their specific issues with Christianity. I've brought messages before on apologetics, on evidence for the resurrection, things like that. And so, like I said, there's usually an issue behind it. And usually in the course of these conversations I get with people, you start to see that there's something more than just the intellectual problems that the rest of them have. Not always. Sometimes it is intellectual. But oftentimes there's something that happens. Some issue. Maybe, I've heard about, this celebrity pastor. As a matter of fact, that happened this week. Another celebrity pastor found out that there was some wrongdoing in his past. Pretty serious stuff. He's been removed out of his position, but that's going to happen inevitably, is that people who have been seriously affected by that guy's preaching and his ministry are going to start to doubt, is Christianity true? Because this guy did a sin. It doesn't always make sense, but there's an emotional connection between people who have been sitting under this pastor for a long time, and he falls from grace, so to speak. So people start to question everything that they learned under him. That's pretty normal. Or, it can be any number of things. But the point is that there's often something. There's something deeper. And so, honestly, you just got to ask questions. And it's not just a matter of, John McDowell, again, he kind of gives this guidelines that when he likes to ask people, okay, if you could stand before God, assuming that there is God, but if you could stand before God and ask him just one question, any question you wanted, what would it be? And he says he gets a variety of questions. Most of them center on the question of, basically, if there's a God, why is there evil in the world? Something on that. And that's telling, and that can be addressed. But he has a follow-up question these days. He says, out of all the questions you could ask God, why is that the one you would ask? And they'll usually have a story. Well, my mom died of cancer. And I want to ask God what the heck happened. When he says he heals, when there's stuff in the Bible about it, why did my mom, who I was praying for religiously, why did she die? Or something like that. There's something that goes behind that question. And so if we can just draw that out, we can start to understand this person. Yes, they have intellectual doubts, and those can be addressed, but there's something emotional that's going on as well. And so we can help them grow in their faith. And I wanted to bring up, this is where we start bringing in some scripture. So Matthew chapter 28. Matthew chapter 28. Very end of the Gospel of Matthew. This is typically we read what if people are pulling a scripture out of the end of Matthew, it's a little different. But this is what I wanted to get. So Matthew chapter 28, verse 17. This is basically where he gives the Great Commission. But here it is. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted him. So even his 11 disciples that were left, because Judas Iscariot took himself out of the picture, the 11 that were left, and the other group of people that were also his disciples, just not part of that 12 that were always with him, even they had some doubts, even though literally they had seen him crucified, knew that he had been buried, and we're now having a conversation with him. I mean, that's not solid evidence. I don't know what it is, right? But still, there it is. They doubt. There's room to grow. I want to hit another spot that's powerful. It's in Luke chapter 24. Luke chapter 24. So let's see here. Luke 24, verse 36. Here we are. And just as they were telling about it, when talking about when two disciples met Jesus on the road to Emmaus, just as they were telling about it, Jesus himself was suddenly standing there among them. Peace be with you, he said. But the whole group was startled and frightened, thinking they were seeing a ghost. Go figure. If I'd seen him crucified, and then suddenly I saw him in front of my face, I think that's an unreasonable thought. Verse 38, why are you frightened, he asked. Why are your hearts filled with doubt? Look at my hands. Look at my feet. You can see that it's really me. Touch me and make sure that I am not a ghost, because ghosts don't have bodies as you see that I do. And as he spoke, he showed them his hands and feet. And I love this part. This is awesome to me. They stood there in disbelief, filled with joy and wonder. Then he asked them, do you have anything to eat? He gave a piece of broiled fish, and he ate it as they watched. Now, I remember it's now a classic movie, Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters movie. There was this green ghost. Yes, the slimy one. Yes, Slimer. I watched the cartoon too when I was a kid. But anyway, that ghost is sitting there just literally just shoveling food in off of a tray at a hotel, and the food is just falling right out of him. He's a ghost. He can't eat. So Jesus, what does he do? He does the most human thing, the thing that we all got to do to keep on living. It's like, hey, you got anything to eat? I'm hungry. And he just eats in front of them. And they're just like, okay, maybe this is really real. Anyway, the point is that if the disciples and all those people can have doubts and be asking for evidence in some form or another, we can't do it. We can grow in that. But like I said, oftentimes there's that root of an issue. So, at any rate, let's see. The second point I wanted to get into is first is, find the root of the issue. Second thing is bring it to the evidence because truth matters. Okay? Oftentimes what happens in my experience is that people start to have doubts. Or maybe someone in a conversation brings up a point that's valid and it causes a stumbling point for us in our belief. Or maybe we'll watch that video or whatever it is. Something happened. Someone raised a point that causes us to doubt. Okay? And the problem is that we treat that like a log instead of a speed bump. And so what we need to do is we need to be willing to stop and, okay, there's this problem. What evidence can I find to support what I believe? And just explore the matter more fully. Because we usually just, like you said, because typically what happens is we hear that point that person has. It's a valid, solid point. And we just, emotionally, we get shell shocked. Okay? I mean, it's just almost like this explosion happened in front of us. We're just sitting there dazed and confused, emotionally speaking. And we're like, I don't know if I can believe me. And so we just stop. And I'm saying don't stop. Continue on. If that raised the doubt, then go exploring. Go figure out what evidence you can find. That's where YouTube and Google and other things are going to be so helpful. There's a number of books you can read. It's awesome how much information that there is. Matter of fact, they're calling today the golden age of apologetics because there's so much information out there. Like I said, this Gary Habermas guy has a volume, just one volume so far, 11,000 pages, or sorry, 1,100 pages. That would be math. 1,100 pages. The book weighs 5 pounds, for Pete's sake. The point is that there's information out there. Let's just keep looking for it. And evidence matters. If you doubt that God is open to us questioning him and asking him for evidence, let's take a look at a couple of texts. Let's take a look at Luke chapter 7. This is John the Baptist. And if you know who John, well, in case you don't know who John the Baptist is, John the Baptist is literally just a few months older than Jesus. They were both in the womb, in different wombs, but in the womb at the same time, okay? They're cousins. And John the Baptist was somebody that was prophesied about in the Bible. Basically, he was the forerunner for Jesus. He was there to help prepare people's hearts for Jesus. Okay, that was, I won't say the point of his entire existence, but that's certainly the only thing he's remembered for. Matter of fact, when he saw Jesus, as soon as Jesus started his ministry, he pointed out, because John had disciples too, and he pointed at Jesus and said, look, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin. There wasn't a hesitation in that moment. There is a hesitation in this moment. Let's take a look. Luke chapter 7, verses 19 to 23. All right. And the interesting thing is that John's in prison right now. He's been put in jail by King Herod, who John's been talking negatively about. Now, just imagine yourself back in an absolute monarchy. You talk bad about the king, you have a reason to be scared. If he's a good king, he may just, get on you. If he's a bad king, he'll catch you and kill you. So that's kind of the situation John is in. He's been talking bad about the king, and now he's in jail for it. So verse 19, and he, being John, sent John's disciples, to the Lord to ask him, are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for someone else? John's two disciples found Jesus and said to him, John the Baptist sent us to ask, are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for someone else? At that very time, Jesus cured people of their diseases, illnesses, and evil spirits, and he restored sight to many who were blind. Then he told John's disciples, go back to John and tell him what you've seen and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor. And tell him, God blesses those who do not turn away because of me. So, John can't come and ask Jesus himself, so he sends his people. And they come and say, hey, look, are you really the one that we're waiting for? I know he told us that you were the one, but he just wants confirmation. Can you give him some confirmation? So what does Jesus do? He doesn't answer their question. He goes and he starts ministering people, just healing them, right, all over the place. Miracles. And they're just sitting there watching. And then Jesus comes back and says, okay, go back and tell them what you saw. Everything you saw, all these people who were healed, and then tell them I'm preaching the gospel. And then that should be good.
He's out.
What?
He's out.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. I also want to take a look at another place, John chapter 20. So we are hitting John today. Just briefly. John chapter 20, verse 24. It says, one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. And they told him, we have seen the Lord. But he replied, I won't believe it until I see the nail wounds in his hands and put my fingers into them and place my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later, the disciples were together again. And this time, Thomas was with them. The doors were locked. But suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. Look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless anymore. Believe. My Lord and my God, Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. And what's interesting about that story is that Jesus comes, he appears to everybody, and you'd think, just imagine, your best friends in the world just told you that Jesus is alive. They saw him. For most people, that's enough. Multiple people. It's not just one guy having a delusion. Multiple people that you know and trust are telling you that they saw Jesus alive. You'd think that'd be enough. Nope, no Thomas. This is why we call him Doubting Thomas. Okay? Poor guy got a bum around. But Jesus comes in and he goes right for Thomas. Says, come check out the wounds I got from crucifixion. He gives him the evidence. And then, after that, he says there's a blessing for those who believe without seeing. The point is that he gave Thomas evidence. And you know what? He's given us plenty of evidence as well. He's not asking us to check our brains a bit more like so many atheists think that Christians have to do. It's very reasonable. There's tons of evidence that indicate there's a God. Okay? So, there's a guy named Nabil Qureshi. He grew up a Muslim, okay? And at one point in time, he was going through doubts. And so he started looking evidence to support Muslim faith. And he ended up coming to faith in Christ because he had a vision from Jesus, basically telling him, hey, I'm over here. I'm not in the Muslim faith. It's an interesting story, and it deserves fuller explanation than I have time to give, but you can look that up online. It's there. Nabil Qureshi. But anyway, the point is that he said when he wrestles with doubt, that he has to remind himself what he knows. Okay? And it's basically just a simple little checklist. So he starts with like, okay, I know the universe had a beginning, so there had to be someone who created it. Nothing doesn't come out of something. Wait, something doesn't come out of nothing. That's the right way to say it.
Technically, the reverse is kind of true.
Yeah, I suppose. Anyway, this universe that we exist in there's so many things that are finely tuned, is the way we call it. And so if it's finely tuned, there had to be someone who did the tuning. DNA. DNA is weird because it's a biological thing, but you know what it is? It's information. Information requires intelligence. It's only meaningful to intelligence. It took humanity to figure out DNA. There weren't any monkeys figuring it out. There weren't any dolphins figuring it out. There weren't any German shepherds or any other smart animals that you can think of that had a thought DNA existed.
A strand of DNA has about the same information as a modern day computer in it.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. And it's microscopic. It is. But
I mean, we have like trillions of cubic computers.
Yeah, it does. But the point is that DNA shapes every cell in our body. That's information. And information requires intelligence. He said consciousness kind of implies that there's a greater consciousness to cause consciousness. Moral law. If something is wrong all the way across the board, there's reason for that. There has to be a moral lawgiver. And then just there's a variety of evidences that show that the Bible is reliable and true. I'd go further into that. Maybe we will get there. Next point I want to talk about is basically just invite questions. Okay? Invite the questions. That's what I'm saying right here. Statistically speaking, people don't leave the church because of doubts. Statistically, what happens is that they leave because of unexpressed doubts. Again, you don't have to wrestle through this alone. And so we've got to learn to start saying some certain things, like especially for parents, this should be the case. But for all of us, to anyone else, this simple phrase, ask me anything. Ask me anything. And you know what's going to happen a lot? You're going to have to say honestly more than once, I don't know. We don't have to have all the answers right off the bat. We don't have to have all the answers, period. But, you know, what happens when someone asks us a question? If we don't know, well, maybe we turn the question around. Like, example, second grader asked the question, does God love Osama bin Laden? Okay? And he suggested turning it around and just asking that second grader, well, what do you think? Flesh it out, okay? But, you know, if they don't know, if you don't know, okay, start doing some digging. Find out what you can. Through it all, this is my last point. like I said, there's usually an emotional thing that's going on underneath the surface. Because even if they're just struggling with things on an intellectual level, that causes emotional turmoil. But like I said, usually there's something at the root, there's an emotional cause for the intellectual questions. Either way, people are typically hurting through this process. And so we need to be willing to show them grace. It can be painful. Doubts can be painful, obviously spiritually, because you're questioning your faith. Maybe existentially, because I don't know the meaning of life anymore if Christianity isn't true. It can be cause problems in relationships. You know, if the kids having doubts, it can cause a break in the relationship, at least a perceived break. And so there's all these problems that can come up from having these doubts. We just need to show grace through the whole process. Like I said, and let's love them where they're at in their journey. Okay. I want to show you one last scripture here. It's in second to the last book of the Bible, book of Jude. A sneeze and you miss it kind of a book. Jude is only one chapter long, so some people read that one out. But Jude chapter 1, verse 22. And this is a very beautiful verse. It says, and you must show mercy to those whose faith is wavering. And historically, the church has not done this. We're not good at receiving people who have doubts. We're not good at dealing with questions. We are like, oh, you have a question? Well, you shouldn't. You should just, like, seriously, I've heard about people being given the advice, probably well-meaning advice, but it's still lousy advice. It's like, oh, you're having doubts? Well, put the Bible under your pillow and sleep on it. I don't learn to be an awesome. I don't know if you can.
That was your verse 2? Can you read it again?
It was Jude chapter 1, which there's only one chapter. It's verse 22.
Okay, I was like, I didn't see it.
Yeah. Can you read that? Yeah. And you must show mercy to those whose faith is wavering.
Mine was verse 2. I accidentally turned over. It said, may mercy and peace and love be multiplied without you. I was like, it sounds good, but it didn't sound like good.
Yeah, it didn't sound quite the same. But the thing about showing people grace throughout this process is that it invites them to continue the conversation with you. You put up a wall between you and them. If you're resistant, if you don't show them grace, if you're harsh in some way, guess what? You just killed the conversation. Very important. And then simply put, thank you for sharing. When they ask you a question, thank you for sharing, because that's a little bit risky. Emotionally speaking, it's a little risky to ask you their questions and then be willing to ask follow-up questions. Okay? So you know and understand fully, not just what they're asking, but why they're asking, all the little things that kind of merge onto that and change our understanding of what is being asked. So that we understand. The more we understand, the better we can answer. Right? Gives us ways to do that. And so, for anyone who is going through a process of doubt, this is some advice, okay? Again, this is from Sean. Sean, that would help. Number one, don't do it alone. Okay? Just invite somebody you trust into that process. Number two is make sure you don't reject Christianity as a straw man. No logic. Straw man is basically their term for an empty argument. Okay? And when we start running into those arguments against Christianity, Christianity can start to feel like a straw man. Okay? And so basically just saying, hey, take the time to consider the best arguments for it before you reject them. That's all. And then that takes, number three is do the research. There are answers out there. You're welcome to come to me and ask them. You're welcome to come to pretty much anyone here and ask them if that's you. If you know somebody who's doing that, going through a process, just tell them, hey, I'm here for you. I want to help you through this. I would love to be able to show you why I believe and what I've found that helps foster that belief. But it just takes being graceful through the whole process. If there's a person who's wrestling with it, there are answers out there. You just got to do research. So, I'm planning on this being a first part in multiple messages. So what I wanted to deal with, this is kind of like the start of things, okay? It's like I'm telling you, okay, you got questions, you got answers. There's answers out there. So I'm asking you guys a question. Maybe this is a doubt you had in the past. I will take them. I can't maybe if I get overwhelmed, I can't promise to answer all. But I want to take the time to answer questions. So if you've got them, please let me know what they are. You can email me at ross@liveoakcomanche.com.